This is Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert, and I'm Meredith. Around here, we explore taboo questions and societal blind spots. Each high contrast guest gives you the layered deep dive you crave, not just the Google results making headlines. My mission, and yours if you choose to accept it, is to inspire curiosity by exploring the nuance and paradox of our world. Each episode is different, so bring your ADD and your earbuds and have a look around. This is a special episode that is kind of like a blind date. Yes, it's true. I'm setting you up with another podcast. Why would I do that? Because in a vast sea of podcasts supported by celebrities and big networks, independent creators depend on each other to grow their shows. So although listening today counts, if you will, for my downloads, it's really an invitation for you to follow a fellow podcaster that I'm personally endorsing. And in return, they are doing the same for me. I chose the UAP Studies Podcast for you because I know that you love the UFO topic. The show is smart without being too highbrow, and because it includes some of the broader questions of meaning and consciousness that are really missing from similar podcasts. You'll like this episode in particular because if you've been following the progression of UFO disclosure at all for the last 5 or 6 years, you know the name George Knapp. He's an award-winning journalist who takes a grounded yet open-minded approach to the topic of phenomena. You may recognize him from the 2024 Netflix documentary, Investigation Alien. You'll hear him share how the information that he knows but isn't allowed to share helps him be discerning as a journalist, and it becomes almost like a bullshit meter for all of the information that he comes across. And then towards the end, he shares some seriously freaky stuff about Skinwalker Ranch that I had never even heard before. As always, my friends at UAP Studies ask super insightful questions that, even if you haven't kept up to speed with the UFO latest, you will be able to track with and enjoy. You'll recognize the voice of past Meredith for Real guest, Dr. Michael Glawson. Not that long ago, we discussed if aliens are real, why does no one seem to care? That was episode 287, if you want to mark it for later. But in the meantime, enjoy this episode and remember to check out the UAP Studies podcast hosted by Jason Guillemette, Dr. Michael Glawson, and Katie Paige. Give them a follow on your go-to podcast player and download a few episodes to check out later. Each episode unpacks aspects of high strangeness with the names you might know, like Garry Nolan, Jacques Vallee, and Michael Masters, and promises to be the deep dive you're not getting anywhere else. Remember, collaborations like this help independent podcasters grow. So please show some love to our friends over at UAP Studies. They're also dropping an episode of our show in their podcast feed to introduce their listeners to our curious collection. So hopefully this will be a successful cross-pollination of curious people. All right, friends, keep it curious.
Hello, everybody. It's a special episode today. Actually, we have George Knapp joining us, but I want to welcome Katie Paige and, of course, Michael Glawson joining us today. And guys, it's going to be a big interview. But Katie, you want to say something first before we get going?
Yeah, I just wanted to, we lost a true pioneer, Christopher O'Brien. And I'm sure when we talk to George here in a little bit, we're going to get on that topic of the ranches and the mutilations. And Chris did a lot of work in that field, a lot of work on the Trickster and the Mysterious Valley and whatnot. And the community's going to miss him greatly. So I just wanted to mention Chris O'Brien. But I'm so looking forward to George. Personally, for me, he's the whole reason I'm here because of Hunt for the Skinwalker here. This is how I learned about, my past. So I am super excited for this interview.
It's going to rock it. And Michael, what are you looking forward to asking George?
Well, he's had such an influence on the whole narrative of UAP over the last 30 years. So I think it'll be interesting to see him reflect on how that conversation has changed as culture has changed and how technology has changed, and going from working on a news station to doing Netflix. I just want to hear his perspective on all that and what it's going to be like going forward.
Yeah, because he's more than just a one-trick pony. He's done more than just investigative.
He's a mini-trick pony.
Oh, he's all over the place. He's writing books. He's on documentaries. He's radio shows. He's a busy guy. But it's great to see that because it kind of shows us, what we should be doing or what I should be doing. I'm going to stop saying we, what I should be doing more is more what he's doing, which is sort of branching out, not just being a one-trick pony, but really putting yourself out there, taking risks. So I'm looking forward to talking with him about that. So without further ado, guys, we're going to start the episode here. It is December 2nd, and we're gearing up for the holidays. So this is actually a great episode right before the holidays, right? I don't expect anything big UAP related to come out from here till December 25th. So I think this will be a good episode to fill in that gap. Awesome, guys. We'll be right back with George Knapp. Well, we're back on UAP Studies Podcast, of course, with the legendary investigative journalist, George Knapp, which is joining us from Las Vegas, Nevada, of course, Katie Paige from Colorado, and Michael Glawson, of course, from South Carolina. And I'm the only Canadian in the room right now, but I feel great. I feel like we're going to learn some stuff today. George Knapp, obviously most people who are listening to this podcast are very well familiar with George Knapp. He's been investigating UFOs for nearly 40 years, I think now. He's also the host of Coast to Coast. He was on 8 News now, and you're still on, is it KLAS?
KLAS. Yeah, KLAS. I'm still there. I'm the chief investigative reporter. Yep.
Yeah, you're still a workhorse.
Yeah,
you're pretty much everywhere. That's amazing. And I'm always amazed. I tell Katie this all the time, that I watch people older than me just like kick it out of the park. And I'm like, I'm so lazy. Like, I'll admit it. At 43, it's not my ambition. I'm just lazy.
Oh, so believe me, there's a lazy person in here clawing, trying to get out for sure. I can't wait to be lazy.
Yeah. Well, I think, was it on Twitter? I had sent a thing on the Unity group and just asking you like, hey, you did great on the documentary. And you're like, yeah, it took like 14 months of shooting and flying all over the place. I'm like, 14 months, man, that is commitment. Some marriages don't even last that long,
And they, when the producers first approached me about it, they estimated we'd need 30 days of shooting, 30 days. So, but it was great. It was a grand adventure. It was definitely worth all that time. I learned stuff every step of the way too. I have a pretty broad knowledge base, as you three do as well, but I learned new stuff every step, and we went a lot of places.
One of the amazing thing I think we've all been amazed at, and I've talked to other ufologists and even people when we were in lineup in Washington, I was like, you watch George's new show and the broadness of the subject, which is a lot. I mean, a lot of people think it's just flying. It has nothing to do with just flying saucers. I mean, abductions, cattle mutilations, and that's a lot to just sort of dump on people, especially when they're just getting into it. But somehow you guys managed to pull that off, to introduce all these different, even USOs. And I'm like, wow, it's such, it's relatively a short amount of time, but you guys touch on so many different things, which kudos to you, because that's not often done.
We kind of wanted, the purpose was not to build a series for ufologists or people who are diehards in this. It's to aim for a broader audience and kind of bring them up to speed. And exactly to convey exactly what you are referring to there is, this is not just objects and lights in the sky. It's way more complicated than that. And to familiarize them at a basic level of some of the other parts of these mysteries. And I think it worked. It feels like that series is moving. I got a couple of colleagues that traveled with us, and the producers, and a great production team. It was a big effort. I have no idea what this cost, but it was a big effort. Kudos to Netflix for plopping down the money, because it must have cost a bundle.
But 14 months shooting, at some point you might be thinking like, I hope they don't muck this up.
Yeah.
I hope I come across good. 14 months, that's big commitment. Yeah.
I know, you can see in some of those interviews at the end, I am just completely out of gas.
Yeah.
And I look like it. And, but I'm really happy with how it came out. I did not have editorial control. I had a lot of editorial input of what cases and topics we would tackle, and interviews we should go after. But the final product was by them. I saw it about 2 weeks before it was released. There were a couple of things I would have changed, small things mostly. But by then, it had been translated into 124 languages to stream to 190 countries. There was no way of making that change.
Wow. A little too late. And Michael, let's kick it off with you. Katie, you're the second in line.
Yeah, since we're already talking about the Netflix show, I'm fairly new to this world, like 5 years or so of like real interest in it, and I had a really hard time getting my bearings on what do you read, who do you talk to, like where are the sources of information. And one thing that makes that kind of hard is like the media sphere is so different now from like the book sphere or whatever, or different from what it was 15 years ago. And you seem like your career has taken you through a bunch of those changes, like starting as just an investigative journalist in a world where like Netflix and the internet didn't exist in the same way it does now, and then moving into this sphere of like Netflix and other media. And I guess the question that pressed on me while I was watching this is, do you feel like that change has been good or bad for the information environment surrounding UAP? Because when you're an investigative journalist, like you're going to go out and do an investigation, and if you come up with something decent, we're going to then air it. But Netflix, which is very different from like a newsroom, it has no real obligation to the truth. Its only obligation is to its shareholders. So they're going to send you out with a camera crew and watch you do the investigation, and they're going to wring like 4 or 6 episodes out of that, no matter if it turns up with anything valuable or not. So it feels like Netflix is or not just Netflix particular, but like that kind of media sphere is kind of a deal with the devil, because they don't have the same incentives that a newsroom or a book publisher might. So like, how do you navigate that? And what's your advice to, people going forward as this sphere of media and interest grows, like how to make sure we get the best and most informative products we can?
Well, that's a lot of ground to cover. Obviously the topic has changed quite a bit since when I started. The stigma was real back then, and the dominant paradigm was that these are ETs coming here in craft from other worlds and visiting us and monitoring us. That's the dominant paradigm within ufology. Within science itself, the dominant paradigm was, this is a bunch of bullshit. There's nothing to it at all. And in my profession is where I encountered the most stigma. The public, after that first series we did in 1989, I'd done a couple of interviews prior to that, but that series, the public couldn't get enough of it. The reaction, as with this Netflix thing, was overwhelming. And I quickly became the UFO reporter. And wherever I go to the grocery store. I'm sitting at a red light, standing at a urinal, in a bar, in a restaurant. People slide on in and want to tell me their UFO story. They always start with, hey, do you really believe this stuff? And of course, no, I don't believe it. It's a news story for me. That's how I've always tried to approach it. What I can find and verify and then report. The public couldn't get enough, but my journalism colleagues, man, they found it abhorrent. They found it embarrassing that I would take this seriously. Now, I'd been a reporter for 8-9 years at that point. I'd broken some big stories. I had respect here in my hometown. I did mob stuff and government corruption and all the things you would expect people to cover in Las Vegas. But suddenly when I took UFOs seriously, I fell off the edge of the earth. I was suddenly crazy. I'm not that credible reporter who had done all this other stuff. It was so harsh, the criticism from them, editorial cartoons and columnists. I've saved all that stuff, by the way. I saved all of it, and I have it in frames at various places in my house, sort of as inspiration. And I have pretty thick skin. I work in a high-profile job, and I can expect to take shots for here and there. But it just was really curious to me that all these people would make fun of it and think that I had somehow besmirched the reputation of journalism when they had never done the work, never, any of it. They hadn't gone out hundreds of nights in the desert to sit outside Area 51 to see whatever it was that was flying in the sky, or interviewed Bob Lazar, or filed FOIA requests, or read all the books by some really credible scientists and other people. They'd never done any of that. They were comfortable with just banging out insults and jokes that by now I've heard hundreds and hundreds of times.
It's never a new joke.
It's the same jokes, So it was a challenge right from the get-go. What hooked me back then was the paper trail. I heard these stories from John Lear and then from Bob Lazar, and my news director and I looked at each other and go, man, this is perilous stuff. We found Lazar to be interesting and credible enough to where we would dig in and do an investigation, but to sort of tell his story, we had to tell a broader story. So the Bob Lazar scenario that there's crash retrieval programs, there are reverse engineering programs, that they're hidden away in the bowels of defense contractors overseen by the military. that was my entry point for this topic. And it is really jumping into the deep end of the pool. And even ufologists had a lot of trouble with it. Now, 2 weeks ago, we had Lou Elizondo testifying before Congress and said, yes, there are crash retrieval programs. And yes, we have these reverse engineering. It's real. We've been hiding it for a long time. So, the topic itself has changed and it has broadened. Now, do I think it's a good thing that the media environment has changed? It's kind of a mixed bag. I like citizen journalism. I like the give and take that X, Twitter, Facebook all offer. But now that everybody has a computer and a keyboard and they can access a big audience, everybody thinks they're a journalist. There is a difference between professional journalism and citizen journalism. I think both are useful for a topic like this. A lot of different input and a lot of different voices. But it also allows people who want to make trouble, demean, insult, try to reinsert the stigma. It allows them platforms to do exactly that and to muck up the works and to muddy the waters. And the government folks, military, intelligence folks who have tried to keep this a secret for so long are really good at their job. And I think these kind of media platforms make it easier for them to do that. So, it is hard to sometimes figure out where the credible information is. My advice is take it all with a grain of salt. And then, over time, things will become evident, what is credible and what is not. I don't pretend to be an expert. I don't pretend to know the ultimate answers. I don't pretend to be a scientist, but I go out and find people who are experts, who are scientists, and I interview them and I convey what I consider to be credible information to the public. Yes, Netflix is different from what I do as a newsman. Mm-hmm. A point that was made to me many times through the course of those 14 months we were shooting, because I'd say, I'd really like to include some of this stuff. We don't tell the whole story on this and that. And I'm not comfortable using I. As a reporter, I don't like to talk about me. I don't want to be giving my opinions and telling people what I think. I'm just trying to give them what I dug up and what I can confirm. And in this thing, they wanted the personal point of view. So there's shots of me driving and spouting off about this and that, which I really struggled with.
Are the producers on the show?
Are they in it?
You're saying that they wanted, this personal stuff. The producers are the ones who were making it.
They reminded me many times, look, this is a news story. This is a TV show. And they've made it so I am driving a lot and I'm jumping on boats and I'm sitting in planes and marching through the jungle or through the desert or something like that, because they wanted a sense of action and urgency. And it was real. Those things were all real. We weren't staging them. That's really the places we went. But it was uncomfortable for me to make that transition. It was really uncomfortable for me to watch it too. I know people don't believe this, but I do work for a TV station and I've been on television for a long time, but I don't really like being on television. I like digging up the stuff. I like writing the stories and putting them together. I have no need to have my face on television. And the older and craggier I get, the more true that becomes, So the media environment has changed. The efficacy of the secret keepers, their ability to muddy the waters, I think has gotten better. They've had to adapt. They've had to adapt to FOIA. Now, again, I told you that my entry point to this and what really hooked me was the paper trail of documents. When we started working on that Lazar story and UFOs, the best evidence, I started seeing what government has said behind the scenes to each other. And there were all these documents that had surfaced, some of which I got and other people had got for me from FOIA requests that indicated that what they said behind the scenes to each other in documents and reports before FOIA ever existed, documents and memos that they'd never thought the public would see, they were very candid about it. Yes, this is real. It's not us. It's from somewhere else. We don't think it's Russians. It certainly wasn't Chinese back in the 40s and 50s. We think these things are from somewhere else. So that is what really hooked me, because while they said one thing behind the scenes, they told the American public something else. They were flat out lying to us. And they were flat out lying to me. When I tried to make inquiries and find out things I knew they were hiding, they flat out lied to me. And in essence, it pissed me off. And that really is what put the hook in. And it's why I've stayed with it all this time, because they're still doing it.
Katie.
All right. Well, I have to take this opportunity to personally thank George Knapp first and foremost for all your work through the years, because without you and without this book, I wouldn't even be sitting here right now doing what I do.
You're certainly welcome. It's great to have you in
so
the field for sure.
yeah,
You've
yeah.
already contributed so much. So
It's amazing. And since we're on the topic of your investigation aliens, you spoke with a U.S. Marine who in 2009 saw a unidentified object on the hill that made this hum sound. And he said, within a few months, there is going to be some information that will shock the world. What do you think he meant by that? When he said those words to you, what came to mind? What's going to shock the world? And how close are we to, he said in a few months. Have we passed that timeline already?
I think so. I'm trying to remember the dates. We talked for over the course of a year.
Okay.
And I think that interview was recorded this year. Michael, it was interesting. I didn't know him. I had known of him in the UFO field and some of the things he had said. The producers wanted to bring him in. And I didn't know what to think because, there are other people who come forward and have told these grandiose stories. And you got to, again, take it with a grain of salt. And I know there had been people taking a lot of shots at Michael. We weren't going to really go down that road for this series, go into whistleblower stuff. They wanted to put a human face on the topic. But then as news events kept breaking, they changed their mind. They thought we needed that element somewhere. And so I talked to him a few times on the phone. We met in person. He's an impressive guy. He's smart. He has his own businesses. He wasn't looking to make a buck on this stuff. We did not broadcast or stream most of the content and the exchanges that he and I had. We took something separate. We went into a vehicle, and the producers couldn't listen to us either. And he shared some things with me, the stuff that I think he thought was going to come out by now. I think Michael expected to be one of the witnesses before Congress, and that didn't happen. In fact, we didn't have any whistleblowers before Congress at that hearing. It was really interesting testimony at this thing, and they've promised to try to get whistleblowers going forward. But I did confirm that A, he had talked to Arrow, B, he had been on Capitol Hill talking to lawmakers, and C, other people in the field who did work on the inside. I got their opinions off camera, what they thought, and they thought it was worthwhile to talking to him. So I know there is always a risk when you have a source that is saying things you can't necessarily confirm 100%. But it was, I think what we used was appropriate, and he's an interesting guy. I think he thought he was going to be testifying, and it hasn't happened yet.
Maybe to the fact that what he witnessed was our own, because he said it had like rivets and seams, and it may not have come from somewhere else. But in fact, we have for maybe decades, even 50 years, been able to have anti-gravity. So maybe that's what it was. Is that what you're saying?
Could be. Yeah, it goes a lot further than that. He was. I don't think I should probably go too much into that, but he's saying there's some other organization that is involved in this topic that hasn't been made public yet, and I hope that we have a chance to break that one of these days.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thanks.
Sure.
The buildup right now that we're having, I mean, we now have people like Ross Coulthard, Michael Schellenberger, we have Daniel Lotus here in Canada. So there's a lot of sort of investigative journalists that are now taking up the helm. But in a sense, you paved the way for all of this. And yes, you say that the fact that you're so humble and the things you just told us about, I'm not an expert. I'm not I don't understand why our generation doesn't have that mentality, because somebody will be out for 3 years and all of a sudden they're like, I missed their disclosure. So your mentality and that of Jacques Vallee's is what inspires us, to keep humble, remain every day. I don't know shit, and just keep it that way and not let the egos come in. And like you mentioned, social media and all that. Now you have all these people rising up that 1 week somebody pops up from actually Toronto the other week. I'm like, where did this person come out of? I've been around for 5 years. I've never heard of this guy. And all of a sudden he's got way much more hits than I do. But with that, I've noticed the problem with sensationalism and misinformation. And I'm worried that as this is coming forward, the sensationalism will be that people will accept everything and I'm worried that misinformation is going to come through that way. you have the most experience of anybody that we can think of in news reporting, not only for UFOs, but things abroad, all sorts of topics. How do we balance that going forward? And what advice would you give anybody on the fear of sensationalism and misinformation being something to watch out for in the future?
Well, the subject is sensational to begin with, no matter what the answer is. If there are ETs coming here from other planets, that's the biggest story in history. If they're interdimensional, that's even bigger and weirder. Do they live here? Have they always been here? Something like ultra-terrestrials, crypto-terrestrials, whatever you want to call them, that's a pretty big story. And if it's all faked, if this is technology that we've been stashing for 75 years, trying to perfect ourselves, that's a big ass story too. And as I was told by a congressional investigator, if that turns out to be the case, somebody's going to prison because they've been siphoning tens of millions of dollars a year and to keep this cover up going, lying to Congress, lying to the public. It's a big sensational story, no matter what the ultimate answer is. And the fact is, no one I know knows that answer for sure. Jacques Vallee is the person I respect the most in the field, along with Colin Kelleher, I think. They don't know what the answer is. They have some ideas about it. And in the intelligence world and the military world, I've been pretty far up the food chain with people who've worked on the inside. You can definitely confirm what they did. They don't really know for sure. I think even if you have saucers and bodies sitting around, it doesn't necessarily mean you know for sure where they came from. You know, the true architects of the secrecy are them, whoever's flying these things, no matter where they're from. They're the ones that make it hard. They give us brief glimpses here and there. Sometimes they allow us to see something like the Phoenix Lights, or they do things like Colares, and we get a better picture of it. But they control the narrative. And then there's a double layer of secrecy from world governments. Our government in particular does its best to muddy the waters, to discourage witnesses from coming forward. And I think they manipulate that kind of sensationalism you're referring to. I think they plant stories. I think they monitor social media exchanges. I think they've inserted people into the arena themselves. As you said, suddenly this new name comes in and they're an expert within 6 months. I think some of those people are doing a job, and they're doing a good job. They're better at it than we are. So, you know, my best advice would be patience. Don't expect an answer overnight. People right now, I get this every day. Well, I'm sick of it. You know, I'm not listening to any more of this stuff unless I get to see the saucers tomorrow. I want to see an alien body. And unless you show me right now, I mean, I've been sitting here on Twitter for 6 months and I haven't seen aliens. Good God. How much time do I have to put in this? I'm thinking, how much time does it take? Be patient. The last 7 years, we've been spoiled. Since December 2017, that New York Times story, that the avalanche of developments that set off, we found out about ATIP. Then we found out about OSAP, the biggest government-funded UFO investigation in history, based here in my hometown. I had known about it for years, since the day the contract was signed, and could not report it. You don't think that drove me crazy? It did. But, there's a gigantic storehouse of information that has still not been released to the public. We try to get it out as much as we can. But in the 2017, since then, look at all that's happened. We know about OSAP. We know about ATIP. The UAP task force gets created, gets all these videos and things together, puts together a pretty good report. We know Congress has had all these briefings, closed door sessions, under oath, public hearings for the first time in 50 years. Now we've had 3 or 4 of them. Mainstream media taking it seriously. I think a lot of that has backed off. The New York Times, Washington Post, who jumped into it with both feet, now have kind of backed off. 60 Minutes. But you now have a whole generation of journalists who didn't take it seriously before, who do take it seriously now, and they're all looking for a foothold in it. We've been spoiled over the last 7 years. People who are new to this topic don't know what the preceding 40 years were like, when you'd get one good UFO story a year, and maybe it would be covered in the mainstream media. And it was mostly ufologists talking to other ufologists and bitching and moaning about who was right and who was wrong. So I'm encouraged by the trend. As I think I might have alluded to it, one of my goals at the beginning was, I'm going to report this in spite of the criticism from other journalists, because I want them to know, come on in, the water's fine. This is a great big topic. It's way over my head. I can't be one little reporter in a TV station in Las Vegas trying to crack this. Come on in. There's plenty of work to be done, and it's a credible story. You have to be careful, but it's really important. And now it's happening. It's happening. I'm not saying I did it, but it's happening regardless.
Well, you got the snowball going, which turned into an avalanche. Let's just put it that way. And it's got to feel weird. I can't imagine what it's like in your shoes. Like you said, everywhere you go, including the bathroom, people always talking to you. That's got to get annoying. I don't envy that aspect of you, but you put your freaking mark in history, in the history books about this. And I know you had no intention of becoming the UFO guy when you decided to be the next Walter Cronkite, but it happened. And it's like the universe led you that way. And as it went on, obviously, you got more and more entangled in this. And I mean entangled because, obviously, like you said, you were part of the OSAP signing. So I just want to ask you a follow-up question of what you just said, and I'll send it back to Michael here. You said that like it killed you inside about the, signing the contract, not be able to tell anybody. How did that feel like, as an investigator, you want to tell the truth to people, and now you're withholding information? That's pretty big, but how did that feel?
Well, I don't have a clearance. I was asked twice to get a clearance so I could be part of the inside. So I didn't see everything that they were producing. I would just get general feelings about it. Sometimes I'd have very detailed conversations with the people who were involved in it, but I could not. It was under condition. I couldn't report it. Do I want to know this stuff? I always thought the information that I get, no matter how sensitive it is, my goal is to report it someday. If I agree to accept some information with conditions that I can't report it until they say yes, fine. And although I sat on that stuff for a long time, some of it, and some of it still, even though I can't report a lot of it, it helps me understand the broader picture. I know so much about what else is going on because of the stuff that I can't report. I can tell who's completely full of crap, who's making stuff up, who's making claims that are wildly exaggerated or completely untrue. It was very useful in that time when I couldn't report it. And then when I could, man, it's been a lot of fun, breaking that stuff out. And there's still more to come.
That's awesome. Michael.
So there are like two big questions that I continually come back to trying to understand this topic. One is, what are the boundaries around what we're calling the UAP topic? Like, what counts as a UAP? And like, it's really hard to define that boundary because eventually like Bigfoot kind of wanders into it, and like occult stuff and ghosts and ESP and remote viewing, and it just becomes nasty and the edges become really blurry. The other big question is, what is like the landscape of possible theories that could account for this? Like you mentioned ETs being the kind of dominant framework, but there's also ultra-terrestrials and crypto-terrestrials. And I've heard a few people say that Hal Puthoff has remarked that maybe it's a medieval secret society that figured out how to levitate, and they've just enclosed themselves in like metal rooms that they're flying around in, and that's what UAP are. And like, is that part of the landscape of plausible theories? How do you sketch out those two big things? Like, what counts as a UFO? What are the boundaries? Do you wander into this other territory in your own mind or in your own work? And like, what are the theories that stand out to you as being really worth considering?
Back to my beginning, the dominant paradigm at that time in 87, 88, 89 was that these are ET craft from other planets, other galaxies coming to visit us and check us out. And some of them have crashed. And, that is still a viable option in my part. And that's where I started. I started looking for documents about that. Imagine it this way, though. It's like spokes on a wheel. A lot of people who get into this subject matter, the general subject area, come in from their own spoke to the hub. So mine was UFOs, ETs. You enter down that and you get to the hub and you realize, hey, here's this Bigfoot thing. Here's some cattle mutilations. Here's crop circles, poltergeist. Now that was an epiphany for me when I started hearing about Skinwalker Ranch. 1996, Bigelow buys the property. He installs this team from NIDS. They started studying it. I'm not allowed to go there, but I hear what's going on from my friends. And that really was driving me crazy. I kept bugging them to let me go. Finally, I had a briefing, a couple of briefings with the NIDS guys, and they told me the wide range of things that had happened there that made absolutely no sense. They go there the same way that I went there, is thinking it's a UFO hotspot. And it was. The whole Uinta Basin, for as long as people have lived there, they've been seeing strange lights in the sky. But they've also been seeing a lot of other stuff. It's not just Skinwalker Ranch. It's the whole basin. I don't know why it's there. But creatures, one of the things that has not been released from the OSAP files, these creature sightings. So here you got these PhD level guys, physicists and biologists and chemists and veterinarians go to this property as part of a UFO study, and they start encountering a lot of weird stuff. Not just hearing the stories, but seeing it with their own eyes and feeling the effects. And then they start taking this stuff home with them. They're not there to write about poltergeists, about shadow beings knocking on the door and standing at the foot of the bed at night, or cattle mutilations that became a central part of their story because of the investigation, because so many of them happened, or Bigfoot, different kinds of creatures. When we wrote Hunt for the Skinwalker, I've told this story before, Colum and I wanted to put everything in there. We're not going to hold back and censor ourselves. We're going to lay it all out, no matter how ridiculous some of it sounds. And some of it sounds pretty ridiculous. The one story that we argued about was, these two Native American police officers come around the bend on a paved road that leads to the dirt road that goes into Skinwalker Ranch. And it's nighttime, and they see two figures standing over on the side of the road smoking cigarettes, wearing trench coats. So they shine this light over on these guys, and they turn around, and they're dogs, dog faces. Dogs smoking cigarettes, wearing trench coats. Now, what the hell? They look at each other. What, did you see that? They look back. These dog men are gone. They get out of their car to look around. There's the burning cigarettes on the ground. Now, we debated, should we put that in? People are going to think we're nuts. We put it in anyway. And that's what a lot of the phenomenon at the ranch is, so far outside the bounds of what we think about as UAP or UFO. The lesson for me was, it was trying to tell us something, that all of these things are somehow related. I've often expressed the desire to have some sort of a unified theory of weirdness that tries to connect all these things. It's way over the size of my little pinhead, but other smart people have been working on it. Robert Bigelow, who has spent more of his own money investigating UFOs and related mysteries than any person in the history of the world, has moved on from UFOs. He's now studying consciousness. And I think that is the broad umbrella under which all this stuff falls. Consciousness links us to the aliens, the visitors, wherever they're from. They're subject to the same sort of laws and rules under consciousness. I know that, as I said before, whoever they are the true architects of the secrecy. They can change their shapes. And I'm not talking just the beings, as there are a lot of good cases about that. The craft, they mimic stuff that we build, and we mimic stuff that they build. And there are cases where these craft change shapes, split in two, meld back together, shoot out little ones, balls of light, and then come back to the mothership. They can, I think, do that in a physical sense. And I think they can also manipulate our consciousness and our perceptive abilities so that they look completely different. We don't really know what they look like. I mean, we civilians, there's so many cases where people have an abduction or a missing time experience. The last thing they remember is seeing some big owl with big eyes. That's a manipulation of their consciousness. Maybe it's shape shifting. Maybe it's just some mental game where they can hide what they truly look like. But it is so much more complicated than just visitors from outer space. And they're telling us this in very direct ways. Skinwalker was a wake-up call for me, and it just said, reality isn't what it used to be. And the ultimate answer is way more complicated than just flying saucers from outer space. I remember the first interview I had with Jacques Vallee. It was in January of 1990. He came to KLAS after that series had come out. And we sat down and had a conversation and then an on-camera interview. I said, well, what are they? And he says, look, I've been at this for 50 years at that point. He says, if the ultimate answer comes out to be these are beings coming from other planets to visit us, I'm going to be really disappointed, because he said, they've demonstrated that they can manipulate space-time. And if they can do that, the things that we have seen them do and documented that they do, they could be from anywhere. They could be ET, they could be interdimensional, they could be time travelers, us from the future coming back, which Michael Masters in this Netflix thing explored. They could be all of those and a couple of things that we haven't figured out. I did a coast-to-coast interview a couple of days ago with this astrophysicist from University of Texas, Austin, The Path to Singularity, in which he describes the pace of technological change that is underway right now. I'm a technophobe, a techno-nitwit, I can barely do the functions that I need to do. And I often shut down electronic equipment. And if anything can go wrong, it does. But the pace of change to me is overwhelming. Cell phones and cellular this and that and digital stuff. And it's only going to get faster and faster in the future. You think about how far we've come in 50 years. This stuff that we carry around, this would have been witchcraft 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And how much technological excellence and innovation is coming soon. If you have a race out there or here or living in the ocean that's even 1,000 years older than us, imagine what we can do 1,000 years from now if we don't blow each other up. So if you've got civilizations out there, stars that are billions of years older than our stars, we don't know what those smart beings out there are capable of doing. We can't get here. We can't get there from here. So we think they can't get here if they're out there. Now, that's ridiculous, you know? So
I love this idea of a unified theory of weirdness that you bring up. And I feel the same desire. It seems to me that any unified theory of weirdness is going to have to operate eventually on the understanding that whatever the truth is, it's not going to be communicable in language and terms that we already have. So like when you talk about the weirdness that people experience out in Skinwalker Ranch, it may just be that if you could sit down, whatever the thing behind it all is, and ask it direct questions, it would say, I can't answer any of this in language that you have. It just doesn't make any sense. The best thing that I can do is manifest all these very strange things to you, and you wrestle with that in some way. And maybe that's how we've got to move forward.
I think that's what's underway. I think the ranch is a prime example. It's meant to be a learning curve. It wants to show us these things are all connected. You figure it out. Same thing with the technology. You know, we've been given, you know, there are crashes and then there are not crashes. There are craft that have been recovered and are being studied. And it's like throwing a cell phone in the chimpanzee cage. Knock yourself out, chimps. You figure it out. We haven't figured it out yet. I don't believe we've conquered gravity. I could be wrong, but I'd like to see it if we have. I think we've tried. We build craft that look like their craft. They build craft that look like ours. It's underway right now. These drone things that are popping up over air bases, drones, a nice prosaic term that calms us down. Well, maybe somebody went to Amazon and bought one or Walmart or something. They're trying to shoot those things down. They haven't been able to using the kind of sophisticated anti-drone technology. It doesn't work on these things. I think those drones they're something else, and they're telling us something. Might be people in the government who can figure this out better than I can. But I mean, the overall message is this stuff is complicated. We're taking you guys along one step at a time. It's not going to be overnight. We're giving you glimpses of the larger universe and the larger reality in the world. And you got to work at it, you know? And I think that, again, is my advice to people interested in the UFO topic. Be patient. Work at it. You can't just read UFO books and read stuff on Twitter and expect to understand this stuff. You got to educate yourself on a much broader scale. I learn stuff every day that I didn't know before about this topic. I wish I could retain all of it. My house, if you could see it, it's a mess. I mean, I probably have 10,000 books now that on a variety of subjects related to this somehow. It's a wealth of information, and you can't learn it overnight. You just can't.
But it's a beautiful mess, George. It's a beautiful mess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We should change the podcast to UDP Studies for Unidentified Drone Phenomenon, because the government is going to try to switch the titles again on us. It's drones. We're not saying they're human or alien, but they're drones, because we don't want to say they're crafts of unknown origin.
Let me add this one thing before I leave. Michael's
please.
Part of his question I missed. How do we know it's a UAP? Well, you know, there's pretty good little guidelines that Lou Elizondo has expressed about how to define these craft. What are the characteristics, the 5 or 6 criteria? I don't know them off the top of my head on my memory, but you know, some of these things are transmedium, that they can go from space and fly around in the air and then go into the ocean and not lose any kind of speed at all. I mean, if you meet those criteria, that counts as a UAP. Doesn't mean it's ET. It just means it's something more advanced than we've got, because we can't do most of what these things are doing.
Katie.
So something I really appreciate that really shows in that new series, that Netflix series, Investigation Alien, is that you take a look at the darker kind of controversial side of things. And I also love the fact that you kind of try to recreate and you test the different theories. You're not going in 100%. This is all alien, right? And I love that about that show. In episode 1, you speak with a 5-time generational rancher. His name was Dave Hunt. And to me, seemed like such a credible, down-to-earth witness, right? And he talks about many animal mutilations that he had, not of just bull, but cow and antelope and elk and whatnot. And in there, they had large circles on the ground. And this, for me, because of the Colorado ranch, I'm curious because we had that 75-foot diameter circle. In that series, the grass grows thicker and richer and really green. And then if you pay attention and you look even where the bones of these cattle lay, the grass there is super green as compared to the surroundings. Do you know if they are testing the soil there? What could cause that? Are they measuring those circles? Is there somebody kind of documenting these things, kind of getting back to our caveman basics? But I think this is important. And also his son, George, filmed that elk and you see this creature going by. It almost looks like it's floating. Did you get that footage? Were you able to take a closer look at that? And what did you think of it?
We'll start with the footage. I have no idea what that thing was. It looks like almost like a walking stick. I know people have suggested it's another deer. It's not a deer. A rectangular deer? I never saw one of those before. It's just weird. Whatever it was, it moved behind that elk, and the elk did not sense it, didn't react to it. If there had been a person, that elk would have been gone. I don't know what it was. And when they showed that to me on the side of the road, I thought, holy cow, we got to see what we can do. I sent it out on Twitter, on X, just to get a reaction. Tell me what this is. And we didn't get an answer from anybody, but I thought it was appropriate to include it in that episode because of all the other strange stuff. We went to Oregon to investigate cattle mutilations. They've had several of them in the last couple of years. I think way more than that's been reported. Dave Hunt, as you mentioned, he oozes credibility. This guy's not writing a UFO book. He's not doing a podcast. He didn't want to report it at all. It's a loss to him. He goes out and sees the circumstances of the death of his bull and a cow. The cow dies with its head sticking up in the air. There's no tracks. There's snow on the ground. There's no tracks. No blood, not a drop of blood in either one of those animals. How do you take that? How do you keep a 2,500-pound bull still while you use its own heart to pump out all of its blood? Not a drop on the ground. Just the same kind of things we've seen before. There's Dave Hunt, been in the cattle business 70 years. He's a 5th-generation rancher. He said, I know what kills cows. Nothing that we know of kills cows. And I look out into his field and I go, what are those circles? Because it almost looks like agricultural pivot marks. He goes, yeah, that's the darndest thing, isn't it? We've been getting those for around a couple of years now, and the grass grows way thicker. I wish they'd come back and make them all circles, because we'd grow a lot more hay. Just kind of joking, not making the mental connection to the cattle mutilations between the crop circles. And I asked him, are you seeing stuff in the sky? He goes, yeah. I had a giant triangle that was flying over my field out there. I went in to get my rifle and take a shot at it. And as soon as I got it in the sights, it went poof.
That was cool.
What he didn't say is his son lives on the other side of this valley. You can see his son's house. The son tells a story. He's also a rancher, about a UFO that he saw. It was gigantic. It was bigger than the house that was right over his house over there. So they've been seeing UFOs. They got crop circles. They got animal mutilations. And I bet if you spent enough time on the ground, you'd find there was more activity up there of a paranormal kind of nature. Now, is anybody testing the soil? No. I mean, you mostly, Colin Keller has made the point, to do a really good investigation on a mutilation case, you got to get there right away. Ranchers don't report this. They might tell the cop if they run into him at the town cafe a month later or something, but they're not. The loss is a loss. Across the American West, where there's been all these thousands of cases, mostly we don't hear about it. And, 10,000 or more cases, and not a single one has ever been solved. Nobody's ever been caught doing this. I was just going through my files today. I found this. It's a report, confidential. I hadn't read this in 20 years, but it was written in 2001 by a wildlife biologist hired for this to review the evidence about cattle mutilation cases. It's a terrific document. I'm going to see if I can get permission to release it. But it looks at what the evidence is. And some of these are humans. These are people doing some of this stuff.
Mm.
There was a theory that Colin Kelleher developed while he was at NIDS. They had a rapid response team. They would go out, they'd get a call. They had developed a network of ranchers and lawmen. When you got a cattle mutilation case or an animal mutilation case, let us know. We'll be right there. We'll pay for the tests. We'll do all the work. So they started getting reports. They'd jump on Bigelow's plane. They'd jam over to a place where there had been several outbreaks, and they'd get the physical evidence. Unless you get there right away, the evidence it degrades. You know, the ability to get any answers degrades. But some of the cases that they investigated, there were clear indications that these were humans doing it. There were certain chemicals that were used, blood retardants kind of things that showed up. There was even a hypodermic needle left under one of these cows. And it was almost like somebody wanted them to know that humans are doing some of them. So Colum believes that there is one level of mutilations that we don't know who they are or why they're doing it, or why they would mutilate them and then drop them there where the evidence is found instead of just taking them away. And that there's another level that tries to mimic the beings, the mysterious beings, but it's government, it's us. They are tracking something that's moving through our food chain. I think there are probably a couple of different culprits that they're trying to investigate. Colum has the theory that chronic wasting disease, that a variant of that is causing Alzheimer's in humans, that these indestructible prions that were discovered by an American scientist who went to New Guinea and lived among the cannibals, and he saw them eating brain tissue of other people, and this disease developed, and he thought it might have potential for our military. So he brought it back. And it was at Fort Detrick, I think. They had an animal lab, and they injected this stuff in a bunch of different species to see what would happen. Some of those species got out. Deer would get out. They've got these indestructible prions in their system. They get hit by a car. They're roadkill. They get ground up, picked up, ground up, and fed to other animals. That's what was happening in the UK. Mad cow disease. They made cannibals out of cows. They'd get sick, they grind them up, they feed them to cows, and suddenly they had to kill vast herds of cattle to stop the spread of this. I think we got something in our food system that has been spreading from deer to cattle to pigs to chickens. Now that's in farmed salmon, because all these different animals, when they die, get ground up and mixed into food that goes to other species, and it's in people. You know, the number of, I know people have a hard time buying this, but the number of chronic wasting type diseases in humans, Alzheimer's, dementia, way up.
So, George,
I don't eat meat. That's one reason. So,
I love meat. Bacon is the only reason why I'm not a vegetarian. But a question for you, George, with what you're talking about, the genetic manipulation of our food. If these entities, and some people claim that these small grays are bioengineers, if they are bioengineering us, they monitor the DNA lines and the progress of it. Obviously, anything detrimental to that, meaning our food supply chains that could change our DNA, would be something of great concern to them, because it's part of their job to monitor the DNA development, if that is indeed what they're doing. But there is some there are some cases, I guess, in the past of cattle mutilation. But in the States, it's amazing. And I mean, there's other countries that have plenty of cows, but you hear it mostly from the States. So is it something specifically in the agricultural landscape of how they breed cows or the stuff they inject in cows? There is an interest with these specific cows in this specific location.
I'll give you a story and then try to answer that. I don't think I have an answer, but I can try. There was the last cattle mutilation case I was on personally was in 1993 here in Las Vegas, within the city limits of Las Vegas. On the outskirts of town, what used to be the outskirts, there are these ranch estates, and a fairly wealthy developer had some cattle on his property. He had imported some cattle from Lincoln County, Nevada, Lincoln County being where Area 51 is, and had brought them to Las Vegas, to his ranch. He wakes up in the morning, there's this cow that he just brought in from Lincoln County, 25 feet outside from his bedroom window, all carved up. And he got a veterinarian, a very savvy veterinarian, who came and gathered evidence. I think he took the whole skull and had it in his freezer for like 10 years, but they called me, like I would know what the answer is. But so I went to that case, and it happened right there. And the fact that that cow had just come from up in that area and that this is the one that was picked was very curious. I don't know what the visitors might be looking for in cattle. And while we hear mostly about the cases here, there are cases all over the world. Argentina is a big cattle producing country. A lot of cases there. Ireland, this book that I interviewed these guys, these two Irish investigators. It's called Circle of Deceit. Terrific book. It was a coincidence that it's there, but it was sheep in Ireland. This one particular ranch that was getting wiped out. I don't know what the mutilators, the mystery mutilators, are looking for. I think they are maybe taking a look at our food supply for long-range studies. I know that, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people around the world who had these close encounters where they communicate with the beings. They're taken on board a ship and you try to ask questions, and there is sometimes communication. And the message from them, I call them alien editorials. They always say the same things. Knock it off with nuclear weapons. Quit poisoning your planet. Take care of your planet. You live here. It makes me think that they live here too, and that they're probably more interested in the planet being okay than they are in us. I think they're interested in us too, for a variety of reasons, but really they're more interested in the planet because they live here. That's my guess.
Well said. I think we got time do you have time for one more question each?
Sure.
Okay, Michael, we'll shoot off to you.
Okay, so I guess here's the question I want to ask. You have this long investigative career. You've talked to so many people, and you have your own way of kind of sensing or evaluating whether a person's full of shit or knows what they're talking about or is being deceived or whatever. You also have a certain amount of that information that you've not been able to publish, either because it's not ready or you don't have the evidence that you would need to be able to convince an audience, but maybe you're personally convinced of it. So let's take that bucket of all the stuff that you know or think you know or believe from people you've talked to but haven't yet put out and maybe never will. If all of that bucket of information were suddenly confirmed or really good evidence for it came out independently of you and everybody could know what's in that bucket, would we have a clearer picture? Would we all be convinced of the same theory of what's going on? Or would we equally still be in this place of like, oh, it just seems like it's all over the place. Like maybe it's aliens, maybe it's government deceit, or...
I've never seen anything that points one way. It's very broad. And as we've been discussing, I mean, there's so many aspects to this thing. We didn't even get into the hitchhiker part of it. So I'll divert.
Does it happen to you?
Just a second. Yeah, it happened to me. So I went to the ranch a couple dozen times over the years. I'd go there every chance I got, and I would bring stuff home. I mean, physical objects. I wanted to engage with it. They brought me to that property because they thought my own inherent weirdness quotient might stir something up. And we did everything we could to get something to come and grab me because the arrival of a stranger. It was me. We got out on the middle homestead, which is this beating heartbeat of the ranch and all the weird stuff that happened there. We made a fire, recorded some interviews, made a bunch of noise. There was an understanding in those days that if you did anything to disturb the ground, that would stimulate something. So we got an earth mover and we disturbed the hell out of the ground. And then they put me on a chair out in the darkness of the middle homestead and left me there and went away with a camera to see if something came to get me. And nothing did. But I tried to engage with it over the years and bring this stuff home. And finally, something came home with me that I didn't want. I did not know about this hitchhiker phenomenon until much later. And again, I didn't see it. I've never seen anything overtly paranormal at the ranch in all my trips there. But I've been there when other people with me have seen it. Robbie Williams, the British pop star, for one.
I noticed him in the documentary. I was like, was that Robbie Williams of all people?
Robbie Williams is a great guy, and he's had a long personal history with strange phenomena. He's a deeply well-informed student of this phenomena. And like I said, he's got a personal stake in it, and we became friends. He wanted to meet me one day, and so I went to his house in Beverly Hills and stayed at it for a couple of days, and was blown away by how cool that guy was and how down to earth. And we've been friends ever since. So yeah, when I said we were going to go to the ranch for that particular trip, he says, "Can I go?" And I said, "Well, I'll ask the owner, whose identity wasn't public at the time, Brandon Fugel." He said, "Sure." So I'm thinking, all right, let's jump in the car. It's only a 9 or 10 hour drive from Las Vegas. It'll be fun, Rob. We'll get in the car and we'll sing songs and tell stories and lies. And he says, I got a better idea. I'll pick you up. So he chartered a jet and picked me up in Las Vegas. We flew.
Because for Americans who don't know, Robbie Williams is like one of the biggest, like most popular European musicians in history. I think they've sold like millions of albums with Take That and his own solo career. So he's super rich, right? So he gets charges a plane.
He's a star everywhere in the world but here. He's also a star here. He has a lot of fans in the U.S. He came to Las Vegas a couple of years ago, sold out his performances, 2 tours, and he sold more records in the UK than Elton John has. He's giant.
Wow.
But he's a really great guy. He's got a movie coming out too, a movie based on parts of his life, and just a great dude. And so we became friends. He went to the ranch, and he and his bodyguard, his security guy, had an experience. Jeremy Corbell was involved in it as well. I won't go into all those details right now, but they had an experience. I've been there all those times. I was there with them, but I didn't see it. However, during that OSAP study, part of what I could not report, but it's out now, is they had 5 intelligence officers who went to the ranch to see whatever it was, to have the experience, to engage with whatever it is. These are battle-hardened, tough people, great training, high security clearances. They're badasses. All of them had experiences, and all of them took it home. It was a female, I'll say she's like a blonde bombshell James Bond, female, tough, smart. She had a couple of experiences, was very upset about them, goes home. She's got her fiance that she lives with. She opens the door to their place, and a wine bottle flies from a rack on one side of the room and smashes on the wall on the other side of it. And it was just the beginning for her. It ends up the roommate broke up with her. Their wedding was off, and it's still with her all these years later. A guy whose name is known, but we used a pseudonym for him in the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. He went there with 2 other guys. I think they were packing sidearms. And people who sort of challenge whatever it is that's there, they have the worst of it. It teaches them lessons. They ran into, in the Middle Homestead, which is, the heartbeat of the whole thing, this big black hole. It's already dead of night out there. This big black thing is blacker than black, and they can sense, and they start hearing these messages, go away, threatening messages like, you're not welcome here, go away. And they did. They were like frozen there for a minute, and then they started backing up slowly. All 3 of those people took it home. That guy goes home, and stuff starts happening to his family. I've told this story before. Am I diverting too much from?
Oh, no.
Okay. It's George. It's story time with George. Are you kidding me? Keep going.
He goes home, and things start happening that are really weird. Trickster stuff, like at Skinwalker. The dog, big husky dog, is up on the roof, a 3-story house. They don't have any idea how it got up there. It had been on a leash, and the wife is standing in the kitchen looking out the window, and she sees a wolf man. I mean, flat out werewolf looking thing, leaning up against a tree in her front yard, just looking at her. She doesn't say anything to her husband or her kids, but the next day, the same thing is back. 2 of her kids are in the yard, and they yell, "Mom, there's a wolf man out in the yard." She goes running in. There it is. And it takes off running down the street, kicking up leaves as they go. It's not a hologram. It was a real thing. It's a physical being. The kids start seeing orbs, big buzzing orbs of light inside the house in their bedrooms. They wake up and they're shadow beings, just as like Skinwalker Ranch at the foot of their bed. Scares the hell out of them. That went on for a long time. And like the family at the ranch, it just really wore them down. Eventually, that guy, that intelligence official, retires from government service, moves to another state. His sons stay in that house. Now it's 12 years later, 13 years later, it is still happening in that house. And it followed them to another state and is happening there too. The rancher, who was the subject of Hunt for the Skinwalker, that family that was tortured for 20 months, psychological torture, messed up their lives, was an economic disaster. They moved out of state, and it followed them there too. For me, again, I didn't see anything at the ranch, but I tried to bring something home, and then finally it happened. I didn't see it here. My wife did. It was it was multiple blue orbs. She's out in our courtyard at night looking at the sky, and these things appear. And she calls to me, and by the time I got up there, they were gone. And then a couple days later, it entered our bedroom while she was sleeping. She sees something over in the corner, and then it got on top of her and pinned her. She wasn't
the orb?
No, not an orb. It was something else.
Okay.
She had saw a shadowy figure over sitting in the on the side of the room, and then something got on top of her and pinned her. She wasn't asleep. She was laying there watching television. So it was unpleasant. Now, same thing happened to Robert Bigelow's wife. Same thing happened to Colin Kelleher's wife.
Oh.
Nobody's really crazy about talking about that because it's so weird.
And all three of those ladies, George, did not go to the ranch. It was the husbands that went to the ranch.
Yeah, right.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Wow.
So what is that? Like I said earlier, these are PhDs. These are people that work for 3-letter agencies, accomplished professionals. They want to go and investigate the UFO phenomenon. We're going to figure out this technology, build our own flying saucers. We'll be badasses. They go there and instead are confronted with Bigfoot-looking things, shadow creatures, circles of light, things that look like dinosaurs, animals that don't exist anywhere in this world. All this stuff. How do you tell that? How do you report it? You want to put that in a report to the DIA? They did, but it got them into trouble, got the program into trouble. Do you write a paper about it for a scientific journal? Of course not. Nobody's going to publish that. They're not crazy about that was the reality that they were facing, but that is the reality they were facing, and they don't really know how to explain it, and no one does. It's why it's that kind of stuff that keeps this challenge going, keeps you interested. How could you walk away from that? I know at some point I'll be so old and doddering that I'll be an embarrassment to myself and I won't be able to do it, but it's really hard to walk away from something that fun. It is fun,
Yeah.
It's worthwhile. And if I die and don't have answers to it, I'm okay with it because I've learned so much along the way. And in general, not just me, but anybody pursuing this topic, it broadens your understanding of reality. You are forced to read stuff that is painful. Quantum physics. I became a journalist, so I didn't have to do math. But for me to read about quantum physics and read it enough times that it sinks into my thick, bony head, it's worthwhile, regardless of whether we get the answers or not.
That's like when you die, you put on your headstone underneath your name. Fuck if I know. Go ahead, Katie.
Steal that.
Yeah, go ahead.
George, thank you for being a spokesperson for the hitchhiker. As somebody from the Kiowa, Colorado Rocky Mountain Ranch, I've experienced my whole life. And I think all of those people that have this hitchhiker thing that really never goes away, and it follows you. We should have a support group.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
count me in.
Yeah, we need a support group because, the work that you've done and just talking about it and the fact that we're able to talk about it more than we used to decades ago, it's a huge step forward. And to that point, I know I don't want to bring everybody down here, but Christopher O'Brien just passed away. Shout out to him. He talks about the trickster effect to all of this. And he was a pioneer and such a great guy and did a lot of work on the animal mutilations. So, he will be sorely missed. But I want to go kind of back to the congressional hearings. We started congressional hearings, I think Congressman Gerald Ford at the time in 1966, right? What has changed from 1966 to now? And, what can we as researchers, investigators, what can we do to help really move the ball forward and continue to move the ball forward and make these topics like the hitchhiker effect something that people are more comfortable reporting, ranchers are more comfortable reporting things. What can we do to move this forward?
Well, as I've alluded to before, the keepers of the secrets are really good at this. They are better at their job than people like we are at ours trying to get through it. Those hearings, 66 and 68, it was primarily sort of a negative reaction to Project Blue Book and the ridiculousness of some of these explanations. The swamp gas thing. Gerald Ford was a congressman from Michigan. That swamp gas episode happens. People see these things. They know damn good well it's not swamp gas. These are craft, So he was kind of ticked off, and he was influential enough to get a hearing on, and they put some interesting testimony on the record. 2 years later, there's another hearing. but it's largely organized and promulgated by the keepers of the secrets. That hearing was a much different affair. There was some interesting testimony again, but they wanted this to go away. They wanted Blue Book to go away. And a year after that 68 hearing, Blue Book was shut down. Sorry, we've seen no evidence that this is a threat to us. We don't even know that it really exists. We're going to shut this down. And of course, we now know they lied again, that they didn't stop studying it, that investigations continued, and they've been collecting information. But there is some aspect with the keepers of the secrets that is either so threatening to our national security, to global stability, to the human psyche, or maybe it's just greed. But, I think there is a national security aspect that can never be separated from this topic because we want that technology. The Russians want it. Now the Chinese are trying to find it. I think the Israelis and the Iranians are doing that as well, because the first person that can fly a Tic Tac and build one or more, you win. That's it. So that's one aspect of it that I don't think we can get around, that there will always be a reason for secrecy in the race for the technology. They could admit to us that this is real, but just think, there's a lot of rumblings now about people around Trump, and I have spoken to some of them, and there is hope that they're going to be able to announce something. But if I were a incoming president, would I want to make that announcement? Because it's going to be a mess. You can say, I'm just going to answer it to this far, and we can't tell you the rest. But there's no such thing as that. It's like partially pregnant thing. The questions that people would be bombarding them with,
That was a good person.
there's nothing else that they could possibly do that would ever be as big as an announcement that aliens or visitors are real, that they're here. And by the way, we don't know why they're here. Yeah. They do carve up cattle. They abduct people. We can't do anything about it. Thank you. Good night, kind of a thing. It creates a lot of problems. I think there are elements of the U.S. government that are worried that we can't handle whatever it is. If there is anybody that understands what it is, there are some dark aspects to this. And I think, depending on what the ultimate truth is, I think there's a sizable portion of the Earth population that would freak the hell out about it. There are ultra-terrestrials that live among us that can enter our physical reality anytime we want. When you're sleeping, you're in the shower. They're watching you. You can't watch them. People are going to have trouble with that. So it depends on what the it is. And there, as I mentioned, the congressional investigator who came out here to check out Area 51 in the early 90s, he had the highest security clearances. He made them let him in. He thinks that the tech and the bodies are real, that they're stashed away somewhere, and that they've been lying about it and committing crimes. So it could be as simple as, I can't reveal this stuff because people are going to go to prison. Look at the JFK files. Oh yeah, we're going to release all that stuff. It's still not kept released, all of it, because there are a couple of people who are still alive who maybe could be prosecuted for their involvement in it, or at least involvement in the cover-up. We don't know why the ultimate reason for the secrecy is. I suspect there are multiple reasons, and the same thing is happening now. There was great hope after that New York Times story, and other media jump in. Congress is asking questions, held hearings again. But you saw that last hearing. These members of Congress, Nancy Mace, saying, we've been told we can't ask questions about X, Y, Z. Told by who? Mm-hmm. Who told you? What questions can't you ask? Not very clear. They had that hearing. They were offered direct hands-on whistleblowers. I can tell you that for sure. They didn't take the offer. Mm-hmm. There's that 11, 12-page report that was submitted to the record. Jeremy Corbell is the one that gave it to him. I know because I had read it and helped in preparing them, putting it together. And Jeremy gave it to them the night before. He showed it to Michael Schellenberger. He had never seen it. Mm-hmm. The committee thanks Michael in open hearing. Thank you for giving us that report. Michael didn't give it to him. He had never seen it before. Jeremy gave it to him. They distorted that. There were people in the room who were watching them, so they didn't ask certain questions. They have been unable to get a skiff to take some of these whistleblowers in. What the hell's the problem in Congress members getting a skiff so they can hear sensitive matters? I don't understand it. I don't understand who's pulling all the strings here But I suspect it's the same people that have always been pulling these strings that are Congress, I think, is a direct threat. They have subpoena power. They have authority to get to the bottom of this, or at least to try and to raise hell if they can't get answers. And I think there are definite efforts underway to discourage members of Congress from pushing too hard on this. And the same with mainstream media. New York Times, that started this ball rolling, they're not covering UFOs anymore. And if they do, it's a negative kind of a thing. Washington Post had an opportunity to do the Dave Grush editorial and sat on it forever. And finally, Grush gave up. The LA Times, I don't know that they ever do UFO stories unless it's kind of a feature. 60 Minutes did a really great piece. I know they're still interested because I communicate with the producer there, but they haven't got the clearance to do it again. The guys who pull the strings are really good at this stuff, and they're still making their presence known. Arrow gets created. Oh boy, that's great. That sounds great. After this terrific work by the UAP task force, led by this guy, Jay Stratton, who is a giant in this field, and we're going to be hearing more from him in the near future. UAP task force pulls together some great evidence. Some of it leaked out. Jeremy Corbell and I reported it. They owned up to it. They didn't lie. They said, yes, that's ours. And yes, it's unknown craft. So after that, they create something called AIMSOG, which is a ridiculous acronym that could never be pronounced. And then Arrow gets created. And we're all hopeful. Great, Arrow. Sean Kirkpatrick comes in. Everybody who knows him knew what was going to happen. They put out that ridiculous report and basically crapped all over everybody. They had invited all these whistleblowers to come forward, loyal patriots, people with high security clearances, had worked on nuclear missiles, had worked in intelligence agencies. They invited them in. They wanted them to testimony. They allowed them to say whatever they want, and then they disregarded all of it. That, to me, was a clear sign they are never going to cough this up unless they're forced to do it. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
No,
How do we force them to do it?
Yeah. Well, recently Matt Ford had said that basically Arrow was already infiltrated by the CIA before it even got going. So that means Congress is putting something together and the CIA is like, all right, boys, let's get in there before anything hits off the ground. Make sure we kill it before it's dead. Like we were talking last episode, guys, Project Mockingbird hasn't gone away. It's still there. Different formats, different variations, but it's still very much there. And George, you were talking about the stigma that you were facing back in the 80s and 90s and even 2000s. At least 30 years, you were basically in your corner fighting by yourself. And the reason that stigma was there was because of Project Mockingbird. It was designed to make sure that reporters like yourself that were new to the field didn't look into it, that you automatically dismissed it as folly. But you didn't do that. So that kudos to you. I promised I would say this. I was texting Thomas Jane, the actor that you recently had on. So I was texting him earlier today. I'm like, hey, we're interviewing our boy George later. And he's like, oh, say hi, dude. I love that man. So I told him that I would do that for you.
He's a really interesting guy. I was impressed by his breadth of knowledge on this topic. I hope to see him in person one of these days and swap some stories.
Oh, you would like him? We took a liking to him right away. You could tell he's not Hollywood. He's like a down to earth person, like we all are, hopefully. That's just great. And his interest in this, of course, blew us away. He did his presentation on our podcast, and we're just like, oh, wow, amazing. I told him he should quit acting and do that instead full time.
Hey, send me a link to that episode. I'd like to see it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a two-parter, I think, that we did with him. So basically, my last question, I had several written down, but obviously we can't answer, I have them all answered. But basically, in this field, especially as a reporter, your sources are very unconventional.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, what is your favorite unconventional source that you find more reliable than others?
Are you asking for a name?
No, just a general source of like, what would you find credible in the unconventional ways of gathering information?
I know a lot of PhD folks who have arrived in this topic and have dug in deep, and they're kind of overwhelmed, like all of us are, but who are committed to sticking with it and trying to get answers. So I like academics. I'm someone who is still impressed when you got a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
And you've gone to that trouble, and not just some mail-in online school, but an actual university, and you took time. And enough to learn your craft and be open-minded. I'm impressed by academics who have an open mind and are willing to follow the evidence where it leads. Same thing for intelligence officials. A lot of people who are not comfortable with the cover-up. They don't like it. They don't like lying to people about things that you don't have to lie about. And they've seen glimpses on the inside of government of part of what's going on, and have had the courage to go ahead and pursue it once they leave government. That's what NIDS was, National Institute for Discovery Science, that organization from Bigelow. I was invited to be the speaker at their first board meeting, and I walk in this room. There's Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon. There's Senator Harrison Schmitt, U.S. Senator Harrison Schmitt, who was the last man to walk on the moon, and Jacques Vallee and Hal Puthoff and Kit Green. And then later, Colin Kelleher and Eric Davis are hired there. There are other academics who had other specialties at that table, but I was just absolutely blown away. And that meeting, by the way, led to OSAP and ATIP, because as soon as I got out, I called Harry Reid. And Harry Reid was the U.S. Senator who became the U.S. Senate Majority Leader. He had been elected, I think, to the Senate in 88, and I had covered his campaigns in 82, 84, no, 86 he was elected. And he got used to seeing me at these news conferences and campaign events, and we struck up a dialogue, and not a friendship, but we knew each other. He was the first person I told about Area 51 S4 Lazar outside of our newsroom. And we were in a car, a limo that's going to the airport so he could fly back to DC. I really didn't know how he was going to react. He said, "That's pretty interesting. Why don't you keep me in the loop on this?" And I did for the rest of his life. We maintained an under the table sort of a conversation. I kept him informed about what was going on, and he helped me in innumerable ways. And then after that first NIDS meeting in January 1996, I told Reid about it because I knew he would be interested by the people who were around that table. And he said, "Hey, do you think you could get me an invitation?" I said, "Well, I'll see what I can do about that." But that was my plan, my sinister plan. And I did. I asked Bigelow, and they invited him, and he went to a meeting later. And man, he was really hooked now. And then a couple of years later, he's the guy that leads the charge in getting money for a study that began at the ranch, but transformed into OSAP, the biggest known UFO program ever funded by the government. They had 50 full-time investigators. 50. We don't know how many are working for Arrow because that's a deep, dark secret they can't tell us or Congress. But they did an amazing amount of work in 27 months, produced gigantic volumes of reports. There's one right next to me here. It's a 143-page engineering and physics analysis of the Tic Tac, what its capabilities were. Really smart people who analyzed.
Kevin Knuth did that too, right?
What's that?
Kevin Knuth did a paper like that too, right?
He did one as well. Be interested to see how they compare. I've never read the two back to back, but this was written in 2009.
Oh,
2009.
Okay.
It's 143 pages, and the public's never seen one page of it. I am allowed to say it because, Jim Lukatsky, Dr. Lukatsky, who was head of the DIA program, OSAP, got permission through the DOPSR process. It took 14 or 15 months to get permission to say what we could. And that was, we published a list, the titles of 100 reports that had been submitted by the OSAP program, went to the DIA, and Congress has not seen any of it, and the public has not seen any of it. And so there's a lot of information out there that I think would be valuable for us all to be able to absorb and contemplate and think about. But if you ask DIA, they can't find it. That's the kind of thing that keeps us all going, though, right? That's why Congress should be able to use its authority to go after it. And I think the keepers of the secrets are trying to discourage them as much as possible, and also discourage journalists. The Robertson panel report. I'm sorry to keep going, but this is in the early 1950s. The CIA convenes this panel of experts. They spend 2 days reviewing the UFO evidence, a couple of cases, and decided after all that contemplation and that deep investigation, this is not a threat to national security, but reporting UFOs could be a threat to national security. But we need to do whatever we can to strip UFOs of their aura of mystery and effect debunking. And it became a national policy. It's not an accident. It just didn't sprout up from popular culture. It was the point. They wanted to create stigma, and they still create stigma. You can still get beat up pretty good if you're an academic or a reporter who takes this seriously. And it's been an uphill fight to go against that. But man, we've got a lot of people who are new to the topic, who have a lot of energy. And I am not optimistic by nature, but I am optimistic about that aspect of it, because a lot of people will continue to ask questions like you guys are doing on this program.
Well, like I mentioned in the description of the podcast, you've been an advocate for many souls for many years that people did not have a voice. And the gaslighting for the last 70 years, I mean, you cannot get more professional gaslighting than the U.S. government when it comes down to this stuff. It's like, we can't do anything about them, so let's control the people instead. Yeah. We can't control the activity. Let's make them feel like it's not happening. And that to me is like, and I equate that to, like, imagine if the Me Too movement happened and we treated it exactly the same. It's not happened, doesn't happen. That stuff just exists in movies. So it's obviously it's similar, but it's the exact same thing. And like you mentioned, it is national interest, but this affects every individual. Katie, she's had experiences herself on a personal level. It affects you not only emotionally, spiritually, fundamentally on every aspect of it. And your government really has nothing to do with it. The military really has nothing to do with it. It's us, the civilians, that are experiencing this, and we're being gaslit by these people. So that's why I think we're mad. And that's why we need champions like you. And I keep saying, it's weird because sometimes I send texts to people, including yourself, sir, and I'll say, dude, I'm super freaking proud of you. And I'm sure people are like, what? Like, who is this guy? Was he proud of me? But I mean it. To put yourself out there for the amount of years that you have. And dude, if anybody should have an ego and declare himself the Messiah of disclosure, it should be you. And yet you don't do that. And we have guys that have been on for 2 weeks and it just goes straight to their heads. And we talk about this all the time. It's just like how crazy. We got to clean up house in our own community. If we expect Congress to clean up house in theirs, we got to start calling out the charlatans for what they are and saying, look, this is actually, I'm not going to charge anybody $3,500 to go look at satellites in the desert and not even provide a juice box. I don't
know what you're talking about.
I don't know what I'm talking about. No, of course not. It's an idea I had. But this is it. This is people like you that to give us, the courage to continue what we're doing, and, proudly so. We don't need to boast like everybody else. We need to jump on the sensationalist. We do what you do, which is, plan it out, look into it before you jump into it. It's so easy to use your credibility in this field. You know this more than anybody else. You fart sideways and people cancel your whole career just for one mistake. They'll get rid of everything else that you've done that's good. That one mistake haunts you. So seriously, George, thank you so much. Do you have anything coming up that you want to announce?
No, I'll if I have something, I'll call you up and see if you can slide me into the program at some point.
Oh, anytime, buddy.
I'm working on some cool projects. I don't know what's going to happen with Netflix. Yeah. It was out 24 hours and it jumped into the top 5 on Netflix.
Well deserved.
Top 10 for a while, and I think it's kind of fallen off a little bit. So if there are people out there who haven't seen it yet, I encourage them to do it, because they asked me to sign a long-term deal, an option for future seasons. I don't know if that will happen.
Right.
But if enough people watch that program, it could. We shot so much stuff that did not make the cut.
Right.
Really interesting interviews. Kevin,
maybe they could do an extended director's cut.
I've proposed that already, and I'd be happy to do that. But I just don't know they've never done something quite like that. But there was a terrific amount of material that we shot, great interviews that didn't make it, and there's enough for another 6 parts for sure that we did not use.
Well,
I hope people will watch it, and I hope you like it, and I hope maybe there's a chance to do another season.
Well, like I said, we're all proud of you. Anything that you do, you want to promote, come in and talk, or you need guests for your, any of your shows, we're always here for you. George, you're an absolute pleasure to talk to, my man. You are a gentleman, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks for listening. If you haven't already, follow UAP Studies Podcast on your favorite podcast player and download a few episodes for later. Stay tuned next week when I talk with an award-winning sideline ESPN sports reporter whose parents died of a secret drug addiction on the same day. We talk about addiction, secrets, and shame as it relates to identity and grief. Until then, keep it curious.